speed is the name of the game right now. Budget overruns suck. When costs go up, sucks. But you know what? Not as much as delays. I've got to get to market fast. And not getting to market fast with a new product, that is more costly than anything at this point. So we have to operate at breakneck speed.
Welcome to Truly Passive Income. I'm Neil Henderson.
And I'm Clint Harris. And today we are joined by Scott Meyers, one of the nation's leading experts in self-storage investing with over 3 million square feet of storage facilities under management. After transitioning from residential real estate to what he calls the no tenants and no toilets business, Scott founded the industry's first mastermind group and has taught more successful self-storage investors than anyone else. He combines his business success with mission work, having built over 40 homes in Mexico for families in need. Scott, great to have you with us. How are you today?
Clint, Neil, good to connect once again, and I'm doing fantastic. How about yourselves?
Doing great. Thank you for asking. Happy Monday morning, St. Patrick's Day. So excited to had to get the kids dressed in green today, make sure they didn't get pinched. Scott,
good call.
Great to connect with you again. It's been about a month. I was actually on your podcast, and I was saying before we started recording, I had some serious imposter syndrome recording that because you've been doing this for over 20 years. Your mastermind is kind of the gold standard for what people want to get out of networking in this space. So I know about you. Neil certainly knows about you. Was involved with your mastermind years ago. But for those that don't, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey through real estate and into self-storage.
Yeah. So I think maybe a similar journey to many folks that get into real estate. I think everybody loves real estate for the reasons that real estate is good. And that is we can leverage it. We can borrow money to buy it. It appreciates if you do the things correctly, and you can force that appreciation. We've got depreciation, so you can write that off. But the things that people don't like about rental real estate are tenants and toilets and trash. And so eventually you upgrade to multifamily, and even though there's more tenants and toilets and trash, at least at that point, you've got some economies of scale. And you can hire a management company or managers to manage it. And that's the place that we found ourselves. And so we had 70 houses and about 400 apartment units. And I still recognize that, I got managers running this stuff, but I still have to write the check for all the damage and all, going to court and all the challenges with that. And, and I think maybe we shared this before, but what I found, Clint, is that I was growing less loving of my fellow man because I'd been lied to and people destroyed our properties. And I recognized that I probably need to do something different because now I'm becoming kind of a cynical person and this just isn't fun anymore. And so what is there in real estate that doesn't have tenants and toilets and trash? And well, it's parking lots, parking garages, and storage. And you can't really build a lot of value in parking lots or parking garages. But in storage, when I begin to, peel back the onion, you recognize that it's very similar to self-storage, to multifamily, except it doesn't have the tenants and toilets and trash, but I can force the appreciation and the value, and I can raise rates, and I can improve the property. There's, I can tighten up operations. I can raise rates where the mom and pops that owned it before were afraid to or never did. There's ways to be able to create value, and then even more when you develop and you buy a piece of dirt and then you put a building on it and then put tenants in it and an income stream as well. And so we moved into self-storage, made that pivot, sold off all the single family and multifamily, and really never look back. And as you know, if you're going to grow in commercial real estate, you run out of cash after a couple of deals, and these require down payments of a few more commas and zeros. And so we began getting really good at raising private equity and bringing along the friends and family money, and then now also some fund-to-fund managers and other folks that are coming into our projects. And we kind of operate now, we operate now as more of a financial services company that deploys capital in real estate, and I think you would describe your company like that as well. And everything has to be tightened at this point. So we're no longer just self-storage investors. We're running like a financial services company. We're running like a property management company. We're running like a construction company because we have to, be firing on all cylinders because we got to get, we not only have to get K1s out at the appropriate time, as we all are aware of this week, but we got to get distributions out as well. And so it just requires a different skill set. So through the years, we've just done our best to hire the best people out there to, level up without just Scott to get to the place where we are right now to make sure that that all that happens. And every day is still striving to either, in some cases, get up to that level, in other places to be at that level, or to set the bar higher.
So before we dig deep into and geek out on self-storage, let's start with sort of a more of a beginner question. For a passive investor who's never invested in self-storage before, what's the business model for a private placement self-storage deal typically?
Yeah. So are you talking about from my standpoint or from a passive investor, what they should be looking for?
A little bit of both.
Well, I think we approach this really with only one goal, and that is that we got to beat our competition when it comes to the money game. If these folks are out there, they're looking at, if they've never run across me, they've never run across you. They don't know yet that self-storage is the best vehicle, and they don't know anything about our companies to know that we're really, really good syndicators and we're really good managers of what we do. Prior to that, these folks have been, either burnt by Wall Street or they decided to diversify and they want to put some money somewhere else. And, they like the idea. Maybe they've heard of, or they, put a Google search in and they're looking at, alternative assets, and they want something that they can see, touch, and feel, and be able to invest in, where they can really track and understand how the profitability and how to plot that out versus, just hoping and praying that, it's going to work with this company I invested in at Wall Street. So we're trying to capture those folks, first of all. And the way you keep their attention once you have captured at least some interest online is that, well, we have to have a compelling story. And that means usually a history of solid returns and better than average returns in our investors. So now they're going to stay with us instead of looking at the mobile home park folks or maybe the multifamily folks or somebody else. We need to attract them to storage. So that happens with stats. First of all, self-storage has outperformed all the other asset classes for the past 25 years. So the three of us know that we started in the best place, period. So we got that going for us. So even if we're better than mediocre, our investors are going to do better than they're going to do when they invest somewhere else. But then beyond that, when they begin to peel back the onion, they need to know, like, and trust us. How does that happen? Well, we need to educate them. We need to teach them about the industry where other folks may not. We need to then, and in our education, you could say it's self-serving, but it's really just pointing back to us. We're going to bring up things that a passive investor needs to look for. History, a strong track record, history of performance, all the way down to, key man life insurance policies. We need to tick all the boxes that we are training our passive investors that they need to be looking for in a syndicator or a promoter like us. And so, and by the way, we do all of this. So we're training them as to what they should look for and how we embody that within our organization. And that's why we've done so well over the years. We do so well by our investors. And so just get them captivated, date them well, but then get them to engage with us, or get engaged or get married to us. And then we need to perform. And so hopefully if we've got this track record of performance, we'll continue to do so, because as we all know, it is much more expensive to get somebody, to pay all the money that we do for the marketing to get somebody in to listen to us for that long to finally invest with us. And if we don't perform, well, it's very expensive to go out and find those other folks that don't know of us yet who are going to take a chance on us, when instead, if we have a group and we grow a community of folks that we have, consistently performed well for and given consistent and high returns back to, well, that's the model. That's it. That's all we have to do. Keep what we got and get a little more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. If you need more capital, there's a really good chance that if you've been doing it for a while, that capital is probably already in your ecosystem if you're taking good care of those people. Scott, a question for you. You've got a journey of single family homes and then multifamily and then eventually landed in storage. Mine was similar: single family homes, BRRRR properties, small multifamily, Airbnb. It took me until 2019 to really discover self-storage. And a lot of people have a similar journey and a similar track record. What I love is that what I see about self-storage, it seems to be a place where the more seasoned investors that have worked their way up through those scale models land. And I don't see a lot of people moving off of that. I see people getting really, really good at it. And there are a lot of concerns, a lot of, like with the investors that we have, there is a lot of education that comes along with that, because most of them have just discovered storage in the last couple years. And the concerns are things like, oh, well, storage is changing and market saturation and there's storage units going in everywhere. And we have to talk about, what matters is a 7-mile radius and residential density and traffic count and all those things. But for somebody that's been doing it for a long time, doing it honestly before it was cool, right? I kind of feel like we jumped in when storage was kind of cool. And I got to the same place where you were. I was like, wait a minute. I can rent people a box of air and there's no kitchens, there's no bathrooms. And I came from an Airbnb world where each property had 8 to 10 tenants a month. Well, you talk about being burned out with tenants. So, and those people are paying a lot of money. They have very high expectations. And so that's why storage was so appealing to me because we take a big box, we chop it up into a bunch of little boxes, and we rent it out. A lot of the people we're talking to have been looking at this just from what they know around their hometown the last couple of years. You've been looking at this for a long time. Talk to us about the long-term trends that you're seeing. If you're still bullish on this, I see no reason why everybody should not be. And a lot of people that don't know are squeamish because of the interest rate events that we went through over the last couple of years. So give us a 20-year snapshot as to what storage used to look like. What does it look like now? And what are you seeing? What are the trends?
Yeah. A lot of questions wrapped up in that comment or question, but I get it. I'm tracking. Because we have an education company as well, as you mentioned. We got our mastermind, and we teach people how to get into it. And so we understand from what investors are looking for, and it's also what active investors and passive investors. And so the active investors, they're already coming in skeptical and feeling as if I missed the boat. And is there any low hanging fruit? Is there any fruit left at all? Because as you mentioned, in my hometown, I see cranes all over the place that are building self-storage facilities, and there's one going up across the street from the other one and right next to the other one. And, isn't this oversaturated? And so I correct them by saying, first of all, oversaturated is a double negative, and you can't be oversaturated. You can either be saturated or, just kidding. But that's, letting them know that, hey, we're fairly sharp individuals here, those of us that are developing in self-storage, and, we're not going to go out and spend a lot of money and, spray and pray or, go back to the mantra like was in place in the 80s in self-storage, which is to build it and they will come. And that's because there was just very few square feet of self-storage and units out there for all the demand that was out there during that time. But since then, the industry has matured. And so we understand, what equilibrium means on a national level. And now we're dialing it down to a very, very hyper-local level because, 7.58 square feet per capita, 7.58 square feet of self-storage per person across the country is not equilibrium in every single market, especially in Florida, where there are no basements and where there are, the concentration and the density of the housing on zero lot lines is much more. Whereas you can have 10, 12, 14 square foot of self-storage per capita, and they are still in demand and raising rates. And so we've gotten a lot better at looking at that. But also, not only have investors, developers and investors that develop, they understand now what it looks like in the metrics in a particular market to know that I'm not going to build this thing because, here is my competition and here's the population and here's the growth, here's the rental rates, all the things that we look at in terms of a feasibility study, we know now because we have history. We've got a track record behind us now since the 80s to understand what these things look like. And municipalities are also getting wiser as well. They're not just going to grant zoning and permits for people to build because they may have done this in the past. And in the wild, wild west, say Texas and other places where they did grant anybody and everybody a permit to go break ground and build a storage facility. And then they found that, well, these guys weren't doing their homework and they're building it anyways, assuming that it'll come. And then they've got a vacant self-storage facility on their hand. The city does that they have to now handle and try to figure out what to do with and repurpose. And we all know there's nothing that you can repurpose a self-storage facility for. You can do it with industrial buildings and all kinds of other big open boxes and retail, which we do, but you can't with self-storage. And so we've got a lot of history behind us. We've got a lot of data behind us. We've got a lot of education and wisdom and experience now behind us. And we have this self-policing, nature of our investors at the REIT level who are going to start asking the heavy questions of us as developers, where our lenders are doing the same thing. They're just like, well, Scott and Clint, they did really well in the past. I guess we'll give them some more money and, what can go wrong, right? No, they're digging in and they're asking the questions about the market. They're asking the questions about construction costs and how are you going to handle this and that? And the REITs have an immense amount of pressure. If they build something in an area that it's not going to produce the returns that they need for their investors, well, that's the death knell for them. They can't. So I think all in all, what we're seeing is just a very now finally mature industry. And it even, to your point, it also, in the past couple of years or the past few years when more people were coming in, well, the hedge funds were coming in, the private equity was coming in, and they were already coming in with their own feasibility. And, really, I think very quickly, as I think you'll agree, and we've seen, taking the industry to the next level. We really had to put our big boy pants on at that point and understand because these guys were coming in, bringing just even a smaller amount of due diligence and professionalism to the industry that we hadn't seen before. And so we've had to all up our game and have our A game on to compete with all the new entrants.
One of the things that we've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years is, we've talked about this before. Anybody who is in the storage industry knows that the four primary drivers of storage demand are death, divorce, displacement, and downsizing. Mostly just people moving. That's the primary demand. It's like 30% of people who rent storage are people who are just moving. And obviously, interest rates had the fastest, largest rate increase in history, probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. And it really, for the first time in my experience, I haven't been in storage that long, not as long as you, all of a sudden, it kind of crushed demand a little bit on that side. What are you seeing, and how are you adapting your business model, pro forma, anything, if anything, or are you just kind of weathering that storm? And the fundamentals of storage are still good.
Yeah, we've got how long? 3 hours left to answer that question. Is that right?
I'll cancel my dinner plans.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a challenging time. We've got what we saw coming into this, Neil, and you personally know the answer to this because we've been living this challenge. It hasn't been a nightmare, but it's been a bad dream. And that storage is going really, really well. We just came off a boom years in self-storage. And lots of folks coming in, the REITs and national players all doing the same things that they were doing in the past, which is building to meet the demand. And we had movement. We had a booming economy. Things were going well. And you're right, 30% of our demand at almost any storage facility, and that's nationwide, is a result of moving. Trauma and transition and the 4Ds, that come along with all of that. Interest rate spike. Movement stops, movement slows dramatically. All these properties are still coming online. Developer syndicators, we can't stop. We don't have the luxury of doing that. We have to finish the product, put it out there in the marketplace, and then we got to lease the thing up and hit those returns for our lenders so that they, we don't have to give it back to the bank, and then for our investors. Well, yeah, we had huge cost overruns, huge, increases in everything, all costs in development along the way, only to get these projects out into the marketplace, put the flags up, the sign on, open the doors, and find that there's crickets. We're spending all these marketing dollars to try to get folks to come in. But, you can't, as we all know, and probably most people on this podcast, you don't create demand for self-storage. That's why we don't advertise in the Val packs that come in the mailbox. People, they all need to get their dry cleaning done at some point. And, most of us need haircuts at some point. Not everybody needs a haircut all the time, but you're going to catch them when they need it. And they got a coupon. There's not a coupon for storage that works. What drives demand? Trauma, transition, the 4Ds. And when people aren't moving, how are we going to get occupancy? Well, the only way to get occupancy is to buy occupancy. And so when folks are opening their doors, they can't just offer a special. They have to dramatically discount rates in order to lure away, the folks that are in the other facilities in the market, make it so lucrative or so beneficial for them to move. They were paying $150 a month for this 10 by 15 over here. We'll offer it to you for $50. That's enough to go ahead and, borrow a truck, rent a truck, get your brother-in-law to go over and help you move your stuff over because over the long haul, it's going to be a savings for you. Before, it was enough to just be $10 below your closest competition and answer the phone before anybody else did. This has been a quite a different environment. And so over the past couple of years, what we've seen is the folks that can afford to slash rates, which brought the market prices down in every market and brought the whole markets down. And industry-wide, if you wanted to compete, well, you had to match the rate, or you had to offer the same amount, same low rate, if you're going to get any traction online for the folks that are looking, for the few folks that are looking in that small amount. And so that was, we've all known in the industry and any industry, quite honestly, that, in the race to the bottom, the first person there loses, right? They're the first ones to go broke. If you're lowering your prices and you're the lowest, you're not going to be around much longer. And so that has been the challenge. So what have we done? Yeah, we have to be very strategic. And in the markets in which there's not a lot of REIT competition, those secondary, tertiary markets, it's been helpful to be in those markets if you don't have the larger players that are pushing rates down. And in the ones where we are, we have to do everything. Once we get somebody in, they have to pry them out of our cold, dead hands before we let somebody go somewhere else. And that means lowering rates. And that means being very efficient and making sure that our expense load is the lowest it can possibly be to get to that place where, for some folks, not us, that you make it to break even occupancy in your development projects, or something that you're converting. And for other folks that you make it to a refi and you've created enough value so that you can refinance it. And, at this new lower LTV and a higher interest rate and a higher cap rate. And if you haven't built up enough value, then unfortunately, the opposite side of that is, you are going to have to either come to the closing table with money, or you're going to have to come to the closing table with the keys to the property because you didn't quite make it. And so, I know I'm going back and forth, but it's, it has been this challenge in this game for all of us in the industry. It presents a buying opportunity for some of us the folks that couldn't make it, the developers that ran out of lease up reserves, that the budget overrun was too high and they ran out of cash. The folks that couldn't recapitalize or couldn't refinance their properties, it presents an opportunity for those of us to come in now and deploy our best business practices. But it's been many, many sad days, many sad months for a lot of investors out there that got into the highest flying asset class in real estate, only to find that, these outside influences beyond their control, this dream became somewhat of a nightmare for them. So we're navigating. Long-winded answer to your question. There isn't anything that we've had to give back. We've taken it in the shorts on a couple of properties, and which has been a very competitive market. Compound that with insurance rates as well, which have not helped us in our industry as well. And it's been a slog. But at the end of the day, we knew what levers to pull. We know what things to do in order to be the last man standing, if you will.
I got a 2-part question for you. I'm going to break it up. And the first part I want to ask, I learned my lesson last time. I want to ask you, we typically focus on conversion projects. We're buying the old vacant big box retail buildings and we convert those. I think that's created some protection versus building from the ground up because the initial cost base is so much lower and the time frame is faster. So instead of taking 2.5 to 3 years, you can get a building. It's typically more like 12 months, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit less. But we've done everything from ground up development, conversions, operational turnaround, and expansion, buying an existing facility and adding on. I know that you've done everything. What's your preference and what are you guys focusing on right now? And is that a function of the market or do you have one strategy that really appeals to you?
Yeah, we're still doing all three, but same thing. Conversions, adaptive reuse. First of all, it's the most fun, and for all the reasons you mentioned. What we found is as you both know as well, speed is the name of the game right now. Budget overruns suck. When costs go up, sucks. But you know what? Not as much as delays. I've got to get to market fast, and not getting to market fast with a new product, that is more costly than anything at this point. So we have to operate at breakneck speed. And so when you can shorten that curve by, as you just mentioned, you buy a big vacant box and hope you don't have to do too much to it. Even if you have to put a roof on an HVAC, we're probably going to do that anyways. And then build it out. No matter what the weather looks like, you already got a shell. So, the construction that goes on inside is already there. So a project that is, where we have to go to zoning and work with, the city and, a number of other municipality offices to get approval first and then permitting and then order everything else up. That is significantly higher than buying a big box that the city has already, the apartment folks looked at it, the condo folks looked at it, retail's looked at it, nobody wants it, it's going to be on our tax roll. We'll say yes to self-storage and we'll probably make an exception. And, here's your zoning, here's your permits, get this thing up and running and get it off, get it back on our tax roll so it's off of ours. That is a much better position for us to be in from the get-go. And then the fact that the shell's done, 7, 8, 9 months and, we've got to convert it and we're opening the doors. So all of that, that whole process, maybe a year and 12 months, 14 months versus 2 years, 3 years for a development project. And that many times is the death knell. It's just the amount of time it takes to get to the finish line. You just might not make it.
I love that. With the conversion projects, these are not properties that were designed to be storage. So you're always running into challenges. I think that's the value of vertical integration and controlling the construction. But one of the temptations with a conversion is, doing just enough to get in there and getting it up and getting it operational because you're in that speed to break even point, right? So you're kind of off to the races. One of the things that I know that you guys do is that you focus on your finishings in terms of putting out institutional grade product, right? And I think that that's the value of thinking about the exit strategy. We typically are building out properties that we're trying to land at a really low LTV so we can recapitalize by a cash out refinance, put non-recourse, long-term, safe, secured interest debt on it. So that we kind of lean in that direction, but I really see the value of looking at the REITs, looking at the acquisition groups and putting together a product that is at least an option for them to take down at a lower cap rate if they really like it, because it obviously gives security to the project for multiple exits. Tell me about what product are you guys putting out there and what's your focus on? Is that what you're looking at as like, what does a REIT want to buy? Maybe we don't go that route, but how do we put a Class A product out on the market? Is that what you're thinking?
It's that, because I think even ultimately, if you're looking at holding onto a property long term and you're going to refinance it once, twice, and it's going to be a legacy holding that's going to stay within the group, within the ownership entity, or if you're something you're going to pass on to your kids, I think ultimately put yourself in a position to, our thought is put yourself in a position to, and ultimately the buyer is going to be a national player, whether it's going to be a REIT or somebody else. They're probably looking for the same type of things. And that will typically produce a lower cap rate and a higher valuation, because we know that those buyers, they've proven themselves, at least we know now, and I would imagine in the future, that they're going to put a higher premium on a product that is very simple and easy for them to be able to just fold into their mix. They recognize that, it was built well. It's built the way that we have built our facilities. And so there's not a whole lot of decisions that need to be made here. And we're not bending or changing our business model or the way that we operate this facility because this doesn't 100% match what we have. Everything that we put out, meaning my organization, we want to be as close as bolt-on to make it a very easy turnkey decision for anybody else to be able to come buy us no matter who the buyer is. And so, aiming towards the REIT. And if you're shooting for them to be your buyer, then there isn't going to be anybody else that's going to be dissatisfied with the product that you put out. And ultimately, there's always going to be a buyer. This is a numbers. It is a numbers game. Let's focus on that. You build in the right area and you've operated it well, but we don't want to put out a product where they're saying, wow, that looks really great, but you know what? We don't like the fit and finish as much. And, it looks like this isn't the same type of product. We're a little concerned that we can charge a premium, so we're going to discount your purchase price by X. That's a conversation I don't want to have, and I don't want to negotiate. So I'm not going to give them a reason to.
One of the things that I've seen people that are farther down the road and are more seasoned, especially in the syndication space and conversion space with the exit strategy, with the IRR and investors in mind, is that we're getting to the point now where we've always valued relationships, but I think we're starting to see the long-term impact of that. And the groups that are farther down the road, like a lot of times know who the buyer is and have a relationship there, or they have relationships in the capital market side of things. So being able to pick up the phone and make a call versus like hitting the open market. At the end of the day, the market's going to dictate the value, right? The market is the market, and it's going to be what it is. So we have to have that, but I think the value of those relationships is really important. And we've come from a situation where if we've got a property that we're taking to market, we're giving it to an agent and slapping it up there and seeing who has interest. And I think we've really dialed that in with the agent that we really like, that has relationships that are really powerful. And we're also doing the thing in the capital markets where we used to go to 6 to 8 local banks and lenders and credit unions. And then things got weird and it was 20 to 40 banks. And then it was 50 to 60 banks. And now we're looking to identify, and I think we've got it, is relationships in the capital market where we go to them with our product and they tailor make something for us. How has that side of things changed for you at this point in your career of like, when you're taking on a new project and you're trying to fund that project, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So the capital markets, 100%. It is relationship based. And if you continue to perform for folks, that's what we want. We want to be able to go back to that well over and over again because once again, speed, if we have to shop around for our money and then we have to delay a project and get multiple quotes and then, go through due diligence again, with another new lender, that's going to take a bit of time. And we want the ability. That's why we got into the fund side of the business as well. It was, first of all, was kicking and screaming. I did not want to raise a bunch of capital and then have the pressure of being able to, having to perform in a blind pool and then go out and find the properties. I think that you open yourself up to making bad decisions because now you've got a hurdle that you need to reach in order to get this money back to that lender. And you may buy something that doesn't really meet the return profile that you had in mind. And I think that's a slippery slope. We only got to that place where we were looking to raise capital in that manner because now we're getting dangerously close to not being able to have the funding that we needed for the pipeline. And that's even worse, to not have the funds for the deals that were coming in. And so to answer your question, I'd like to be able to have a pot of money available so that when I have a deal or a portfolio I'm going to buy or something I'm going to build, that I can call them and then the money arrives instead of having to, raise it, pay them for it until I use it, or that I have to go through and know that I have to go out and court and date, 40 to 50 banks or, 10 banks and hope that somebody gives me good rates and terms for this project before it falls out of contract and start all over again. Because again, speed is the name of the game. And that is one of the most difficult pieces, I think, for people that are either beginning or in that interim. I got 90 days to Bankers don't want to talk to us unless we get a deal, right? Okay, well, I got a deal. Do you really? No, it's an LOI. No, you don't have a deal. Well, now it's under contract. Now the clock's ticking. I got to close it in 75 days. Well, our due diligence process is 30, and then we go to committee in 45. That's a dangerous position to be in. So once again, it's all about that timing. So we want to have those good relationships with those lenders, and you can't have too many. When it comes to then the exit strategy, as you mentioned, Clint, you're taking it out to a broker or a group, or just slapping it out there, as you say. I guess I don't want people to misinterpret that. We do have those same relationships that you talked about, and these are the folks that with the brokers who have relationships with our ultimate buyer, and we know that. They've got, at the speed dial, they know who is going to be the buyer for this property or this portfolio, but we still put it out. I have them listed because I have a fiduciary responsibility to my investors that, I need to put this out to the market, and it has to get most eyeballs on it, because the most eyeballs means that it's going to be put in the best position to be bid on by multiple people, and they're going to get, the highest amount of money back. All that to say, we do that, but we already know that we know the person who probably we talked about first is going to be the one that bought it, because that's the person that we put it in front of, and then the negotiation begins, and they'll usually have first right of refusal, and we get it as long as we get the max for our investors. But that side is much easier because it is on the buy side than it is on the money side. But all of this, like any business, it is a relational game, and you just got to say what you do and do what you say. Let your yes be yes.
So your self-storage masterminds created what you have called the biggest underground community of self-storage investors. How has the collaborative learning through this mastermind shaped your own investment strategy? And what's the most surprising lesson you've learned from other members of that mastermind?
Well, I can't tell you that, Neil. It's a secret because it's the biggest underground group of self-storage investors out there.
You missed a key word, Neil.
You already know the answer to that. You answered it in your question. Well, let me clarify that, since I pointed to it. When I say underground, there's a whole lot of folks doing business in the mastermind that you don't see. These properties don't come out to market. We got an army of self-storage assassins when it comes to marketing and deal flow, and we're sharing it within the community. And so that's when we talk about the underground. If we listed all the sales, the deals that were done within that our mastermind on an annual basis, it would rival some of the largest brokerage firms out there who are always publicly talking about how many deals they do. But the things that we've learned through that, I began this, Neil, as you know, because you were around in the beginning stages of this, and that is somewhat self-serving, but in a very good way. I think those of us that are entrepreneurs, we recognize that hopefully we recognize if we're going to grow that we need to learn from smarter people, and I don't need to be the smartest person in the room, or otherwise I'm not growing, and that's not beneficial. So I filled the room with people that were smarter than me in self-storage, that have been through at least one more cycle, that have done everything, conversions, acquisitions, development. I want to put these folks, and the folks that were in management on a day-to-day basis, property management companies, because I knew what to do and we knew how to do it, but I don't like management. I'm a hunter, I'm not a farmer. And so I want to put the best of the best in the ops side in the room so that we can point to, we wanted the attorneys, we wanted brokers, we wanted folks that were, doers, folks that were scaling and growing, so that we could all learn from each other, because the fire burns hotter when the coals are closer together. When we all get in a room and we all agree. And, the beauty, as you guys know, this industry, the beauty of this, one of the many, is that we're all friendly competitors here. There's a couple of people we'll stumble into in our, 5 to 7 mile radius, but for the most part, we're all out there, and we'll share 95, 98% of our secret sauce, if you will. And we'll keep, 3 to 5% of it, because that's really, at the end of the day, that's all there is. And so we're all trying to get better. And that makes us all better when we come up against each other, and not outbidding or doing stupid things in a market to ruin it. And so we've all learned our best business practices. Everybody shares, and they understand that, by the old African proverb, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And what we've been able to do and create is, the synergies, the relationships, the seamless, frictionless way of doing business within our community. Instead of, hey, I got a deal, but it doesn't fit my buy box, I'm just going to let it go by the wayside and not monetize it. And I was like, well, hold on a second. You know what? There is such a thing as a referral fee and a wholesale fee or a finder's fee. You can do a joint venture. Here's a deal that's too big. I can't do this on my own. More commas and zeros than I have. Okay, well, why don't you take 50% of it and get somebody else to bring the other 50% of the commas and zeros, or you wholesale it for a fee, or, whatever this looks like. I got to the place where I got so sick and tired of losing deals because I didn't have access or the way to put it together or manage it, or it's too far away, too big, too small. And, we decided that, if we're all working together, don't let them, no offense to the brokers out there in the brokers community, but don't let them go out back to the market and back to a broker or list it with a broker. Let's keep it in the community here, and we can collaborate. We can do deals together. We can pass them off one to the other. And at the same time, if we're all doing this very well and sharing our best business practices, well, the industry is going to get better. And when the industry gets better, it's better for all of us. Yes, our clients, but for us as investors, period.
I love that. Keyword is community. I mean, I honestly believe we all are who we are going to be 10 years from now, with the exception of the places we go, the people we meet, the content we consume, the books we read. Putting yourself in an environment where you're surrounded by like-minded people, and honestly, in an industry where we all actively talk about what we're doing and are willing to share, because it's really not competitive, because what matters with storage is people are willing to drive about 7 miles. And so I don't care what's happening nationwide with self-storage. I care about what's happening in the microeconomy where I'm operating, so I can be willing to share. And everybody that I've run into has an abundance mindset. You certainly have. And so I'm sure that's the culture of the group that you put together. I want to ask a question about something that's bigger than this, right? Everyone's pursuit of commercial real estate success is usually tied to some level of financial time and location independence, to give an independence of purpose of how you want to spend your life and what's important to you. You've combined your business success with mission work, and you've built to the last number that I had on your bio was 40 houses that you built in Mexico for families in need. So now we're talking about things that are of eternal significance, or at least more important than renting somebody a box of air. Tell me about how you got started there, what that's like, and what kind of impact that's had.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just part of our DNA. It was there from the beginning. My wife and I, we got into real estate because we wanted to create a lifestyle for our family that we didn't have growing up. Our dads worked a lot, great men, but they didn't really speak into our lives. And we want to be around. We want to raise our kids with our own values and not send them off somewhere where they were getting somebody else's values. We also wanted to be able to take them to Washington, D.C., teach them about our government for a week and not have them get a lower grade because they were not listening to, that gal who chose to make academia her life for a week. And we didn't think that was fair. So, we wanted to create, I think like most of us, to do what we want, when we want, with who we want, whenever we want. And so that was the first piece. But then also a big, piece of that is we wanted to spend time on the mission field. That is just something that has been important to us. And so we did go on a mission trip that was sponsored by somebody else. A good friend of ours that went to the same school as our kids did. And this was a habit. This was a cadence in his company that he would take every employee on a mission trip, short-term, family-friendly mission trip to either the Dominican Republic or Mexico to build a house. And in 2 days, 4-day trip, in 2 days, you build a house, and a day of travel, on the front and the back end. And our kids came home and said, Mr. Lindsay offered to take the school to on a trip. Whoever wanted to go, can we go? And he's paying for it. So my wife and I looked at each other and said, well, plane tickets is all we need. And we've been talking about doing something with them. We always thought they were too young. And so we went. Long story short, we were wrecked. And yeah. Okay, you can edit that out. Sorry.
No, we're not.
Yeah, this is important. This is what we're all doing this for. This is why I asked about it.
Yeah. So we came back and I told my wife, I said, I want to do this and we're going to do this. And so we began tithing corporately and just setting 10% aside of our profits until we had enough money to do the same thing, to be able to take our friends, family, coworkers, staff, whoever wanted to go on a short-term family-friendly mission trip, build a house and give the keys to a deserving family. And so then one house became 2, and then 2 houses became 3, and then 1 trip a year became 2, and 3 to 4 houses per trip. And then we have other folks coming along beside us and with us who said, hey, I want to do that in my own business as well. Can you show us how to do it? And so the ripple effect, of how we got started, we began to see that play out. And honestly, I don't know why, but I didn't see that coming. I mean, that's how we came to do this, is because somebody did it for us. And so, to see the ripple effect of now really all the houses that have been built as a result of, somebody else's obedience first, and heart, and generosity and charitable, persona in the beginning, came through us, and that came through us to others. And so, that is the most important thing. It's not just more important and, something that we do in addition to. I mean, this is why we exist. It truly is. This is what we're meant to do. And so as we make money, God allows it to flow through us and to make a dent in the world.
Well, Scott Meyers, this went way too fast. Always enjoy talking to you, my friend. If any of our listeners want to find out more about what you're all about, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, all things self-storage. Go to selfstorageinvesting.com. Lots of free information, downloads, white papers, and just about anything and everything you want to learn about the business. And then also ways for those of you that are actively investing to learn about our mastermind if you want to level up and join all of us there. And for those that want to invest with us passively, I won't promote that too much because Clint and Neil do that very well as well. But we do have other types of investments available to you often as well. So selfstorageinvesting.com is the best way to find us.
That's great. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate your time and the opportunity to record some of your thoughts. I know I'm going to go back and listen to it a couple times. So I really appreciate you. Thank you very much for what you've been willing to share.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Clint. Neil, good to catch up again. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for listening and watching the Truly Passive Income podcast. If you liked the show, if you think it would be useful for someone else, the greatest compliment that you could give us would be to share the episode. Leave a comment down below or leave us an honest review. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let us know down below. And remember, with truly passive income comes freedom of time, place, and the freedom to pursue your higher purpose.